in here and you're talking about this stuff, this is very helpful for people. They can listen to it. It helps them to understand what's going on. Your thought process is so much better than in a forum post where they can just go off with their imaginations. All right, I'm recording.
I'm recording as well.
Dang straight you are, Joey. See, how could I kick you out? How could we kick you out of this? You're one of the only people who sits here and records with me. And God knows Tony K is going to cuss on his recording, so.
All right, so you guys ready?
Yep.
All right. So I've been thinking a lot about everything that's gone on in the past several days to establish a solid merger plan. And there's been all kinds of debates about what the allocation should be and should we do the mergers at all. So there's a poll going on right now that has had a lot of votes, a lot more votes than any poll I've seen, even on Bitcoin Talk, where there's been 130 plus people chiming in on whether or not there should be a merger. And it seems like the vast consensus is that 80% agree that it is a better overall deal for the entire ecosystem. So as a result of this, the pie will get bigger for everyone. And now we are talking about how to divide up the larger pie. So we've got a lot of different people with a lot of different expectations and so on and so forth. I'd like to remind everyone that there is no obligation for PTS or AGS holders. Any DAC is free to do whatever it wants and free to compete if they think they can come up with a better mix and gain more support. And in this case, I proposed a mix that I think gets everyone on board. As someone who knows a lot of people with large investments in all of the affected crypto assets, I can easily look at this from my perspective in each and every case. So I try to balance everything out. So just for a review, for those who listen to this mumble session rather than read the forum, we allocated 80% to BitShares X, 7% to PTS, 7% to AGS, 3% for DNS, and 3% for Vote, with all of the systems, both DNS, PTS, and AGS having a 2-year vesting period that's linear, meaning if you want liquidity earlier, you can do so on a percentage basis. So if you want to sell in a year, you can get 50%. If you want to sell in a month, you can get 1/24%. So the reason for the vesting period is based on the fact that all those assets, DNS, PTS, AGS, and Vote, represented stakes in incomplete systems that probably had a 2-year development roadmap before they would see any type of real liquidity. The other issue is that while BTSX has much better liquidity than the rest of the system, we can't just use market caps. It only takes $10,000 worth of selling pressure on DNS to cut the price in half. There's no reason to make everyone in DNS liquid so they can sell when they weren't really liquid to begin with. And the same goes for PTS. If there was any reasonable amount of selling on PTS, then price would fall dramatically. So there's a difference between perceived liquidity and actual liquidity, and that needs to be factored into the case. So having a 2-year period means that over 2 years, everyone is as liquid as BitShares X. Now, BitShares X isn't even perfectly liquid. If everyone tried to sell BitShares X, it'd fall dramatically. So you have to look at the depth of these markets when you're comparing their value and their liquidity. And when you mismatch liquidities levels, you can't just match market caps because that changes everything. There's a lot of people that aren't selling their PTS because if they attempted to sell, the price would crash. We are one of those people. We've got a lot of PTS. We'd love to sell it for development purposes, but we can't because the price of PTS would fall tremendously. So we have to hold it. And so the only people that are willing to sell those are selling a little bit or buying a little bit, and that's setting the market cap. But we cannot just honor straight market caps because of the difference in liquidity of the various products. And so by doing it this particular way, vote, DNS, PTS, and AGS combined add up to 20% of everything past and future. And they're mostly the same exact stakes because it was DNS was mostly 50-50 AGS and PTS, and vote was 35-35 or something close to that. So overall, it's pretty close to 10% AGS PTS, with the only difference being anyone who bought or sold after the vote DNS snapshot. And considering that most people held their PTS during that period, there certainly hasn't been enough volume to suggest the entire market cap of PTS has turned over and is now in new hands. The effective average is that we are giving almost 10% to AGS and PTS, and a little bit more to people who bought in after the snapshots. So that was my thinking in the entire allocation strategy. I don't think it's perfect. I don't think it's terrible. So what is the consequence of this announcement? Well, PTS price has fallen and DNS price has fallen, mainly because of liquidity and being bought out. DNS has been effectively bought out at a fraction of its theoretical market cap, but it's also gained a significant advantage. From the perspective of someone who owns BitShares X, you have to consider, should we buy DNS or compete with them? And our decision to buy DNS rather than compete with them, even at a discount, is very generous to get goodwill of those people, and because we recognize that it's mostly, again, AGS and PTS holders. So that is effectively all we have done. And I tried to make this as rational as I could in light of the fact that there are too many variables to possibly come to an objectively fair solution.
Well, out of curiosity, do you think it would be possible if we could set up something where we have these types of kind of like a hangout? I can make time to set these up. If you want to have them at different times, like when you have something like a proposal, you could announce it here and then post it and have people asking questions and everything before they make these decisions. Because I think what happens sometimes is they see these huge drop-offs and they freak out, and then they start wondering, they start questioning things, and all it takes is an imagination can go wild on either way. You know, it can go wild based on great potentials and scary potentials, and fear and greed are some very powerful forces. So it would be, I think it would be helpful, and I hope that everybody will tell me what in Bytemaster what they think. If you would be able to come on and say something like this before posting something that may, I mean, I understand you can't always do this, and you never know exactly what posts are going to create a big ruckus. But for something that's potentially a big proposal, if maybe we can bring on the community and maybe get their ideas of how they feel before posting it, so you can minimize the potential damage based off of people's errant imaginations. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. That's why I decided to get on this call, and it looks like a lot of people that are actively on the forum joined it. I can't spend all my time on Mumble
Sure.
as much as I would like, but I do think that being available to discuss it is good, and I do think we need to get to a resolution. So, now recognizing that my proposal isn't perfect, but nothing is there anything catastrophic that anyone thinks I missed?
Joe, do you want to talk to Bytemaster and kind of give your opinions on?
I only saw the proposal minutes before Bytemaster came on this forum on the Mumble, so I'm still trying to get my mind around it. But one thing, I don't know if you talked about it just now, but the future prospects about PTS and AGS being kind of the benchmark and first stakeholders in all the new future DACs, will that still be part of this new system?
Under the new system, any clone should honor BTS as a starting point, and of course it will then dilute from there because they're a new system and they need to raise capital. So that'd be like someone saying, well, I want to take Bitcoin, clone it, add dilution to raise capital and grow it. I think that's how Bitcoin should split. That's what the altcoins should have done. But obviously someone can say, well, I think I can get a different set of users. I'm going to clone your code and try to gain a network effect by doing something different. That's what it comes down to. If someone doesn't like what we're doing, they can clone it. If we did a really, really bad job in allocating things, then there's free market competition. Go ahead. Fork, dilute, pay your own development team, and go. That's effectively what the free market decentralization means.
Wow.
I've been. I don't know if there has been a lot of discussion yet about the percentage distribution on the forums. I only saw people getting angry at the PTS guys getting angry at the AGS and the other way around.
The people have been discussing and making proposals left, right, and center for the past 24 hours, and with arbitrary, very complex rationale, and of course none of it's been perfect. The proposal I had, again, is 3% vote, 3% DNS, 7% AGS, 7% PTS, 80% BitShares X, vesting over 2 years. And that is, the result of that is actually that our theoretical inflation rate is no worse than Bitcoin, 10% per year. And it lines up with the maturity of the features. So overall, I think it's a good compromise. Of course, people are pointing out that as a result of that particular announcement, PTS has fallen in price, and DNS has fallen in price. Yeah, that's probably the case. But if we didn't do that, then guess what would happen? BitShares X would have fallen in price. So now the sell pressure on DNS is buy pressure on BitShares X. Those who continue to own DNS and continue to own PTS are the long-term holders, and they're going to end up rewarded with a larger stake for their commitment than the people who are selling the other systems.
Well, I know that it's not going to be popular to say this, but I went into this thinking, from the very beginning. I mean, 10% PTS and 10% AGS to everything that I ever have for the rest of of this whole shindig would be if it ends up becoming extremely successful. I don't know that that's very healthy for me to have. It's almost like creating another system that I don't like that we have right now, where the incumbents seem to always get a large enough stake in everything that they can essentially destroy it. And I've never wanted to be part of that. So I expected it at some point in time, and almost even hoped that over time these things would kind of not give quite as much. I didn't expect it to happen quite as soon, but it's not killing me. I mean,
The problem with snapshotting BTS going forward is that you've pretty much flipped around the culture. Most of the BTSX people are obviously against having other DACs, so it doesn't even make sense anymore to snapshot to BTS, because there's like been this cultural shift, like huge change between the owners of PTS and what will be BTS.
It is true that the multi-DAC culture, I still strongly support that in the long run. And I wouldn't be doing this if I could say, all right, what would have happened to the value of PTS or AGS if I created a fund, moved half the funds into it, appointed Agent 86, or someone who's got solid ideas and can manage it. And here's the money. You go take care of creating competitors with me, and now I'm going to go focus making BitShares X the best thing I can. I think you would have seen two things happen. BitShares X would have fallen in price, and the other systems would also have fallen in price, because as good as Agent 86 is, their budget would be known, and who knows? So it's real challenge of what the options are on the table for doing things. And I think that the whole ecosystem, if you look at the current people in it, we're as the early adopters, and once we turn on the marketing engine, we are going to be in the fraction of 1% of the user base, and no one's going to even remember this particular part of our history.
We will.
We will, but as a percentage of people out there, very few people will be aware. And in fact, the way we're marketing this is Bit Gold is market pegged. You don't have to do anything other than trust the delegates to publish it on its feed. And that is a much stronger system in general for currencies than other things. I will point out that BitShares is now up 10.6% from the lows, almost back to 50 million. So it definitely seems like the certainty is helping, and that the idea proposed is much more agreeable.
And I bought in more cheap, just to let everybody know.
For the speculators at least, because I think most of them now are looking at which player gets the biggest stake. So I don't know if this is an actual long-term trend, or more like a shuffling of people trying to get the best spot.
And it's also worth noting that PTS seems to be, it's down 3%, but that's relatively stable, all things considered.
Well, he came on here, everybody, so if there's any questions, I'm always going to hound you guys to either ask them in chat so I can ask them for you, or open up your mic. Don't feel free to ask your questions so you can feel comfortable with what's going on and give your piece.
Or type them so somebody else can read them out. I still have to get my mind wrapped around this. To me, it was the departure of the what I perceived as the bazaar model to the cathedral model is something I still have to come to grips with. So this one I haven't really had the time to actually consider all the options and all the implications yet.
Yeah, it's the only reason I wanted to get everybody in here is because it seemed like we were in here talking, and when imaginations go wild, sometimes it can form a snowball, and it's kind of good to nip it in the butt before that happens, so people can stand on solid ground, or at least know that the ground is going to be a little bit shaky, for the next, for a short period of time, so they're not concerned that the world's ending.
Like we were talking about earlier, before Bytemaster showed up, is that I think the before BitUSD was launched and BitChaseX was a fact, people were still not unsure. We're still unsure about that prospect, and we're looking a little bit into the other coins as well. So now that BitUSD is a proven, somewhat proven concept, and it actually makes sense for all the other DACs to use it. That kind of changes the whole distribution model of who gets the concept from where. So BitChaseX now being part of all the other DACs kind of makes it hard to prove this social contract of them not having to pay any respects. So BitUSD kind of changed the whole idea. Oh, there are questions. Sorry.
It's okay. Soul says some tough in the 10% dilution a year.
Right, so I want to address that. I'm going to recommend a fixed block reward maximum of 2,500 BTS per block, which is very close to 25 BTC per block that Bitcoin's currently doing. As the number of shares increases, there will be a gradually decreasing percentage dilution over time. And we can just say, yes, we're doing no different than Bitcoin. We can just use the money for something better than mining. Then we can leave the delegate pay as a percentage, 0 to 100% of that maximum limit.
So is there going to be like a super wallet that now includes what is DNS, what will be DNS voting? I mean, is it all going to be one super wallet?
I'm sure there will be a super wallet, and there's probably going to be many other lightweight wallets. We're thinking about a wallet that is only for BUSD and hides everything else in the system for the average guy out there who just wants a BUSD bank account. But because it's going to be more of an Ethereum style system, each application developer who wants to do something like voting is going to be an app on the DAC rather than a DAC in itself. It's going to have its own voting booth that you can download, and the voting booth is not going to have everything under the sun in one spot. It's just going to be, register to vote, get your ID verified, cast your vote, change your vote, kind of thing. Whereas the full wallet might support it all. So the details there are varied, but for those who don't know, Vote and DNS are on board as far as the key players are concerned. And this is actually good for us because Adam Ernest, who is the lead of Follow My Vote, is a great proven internet marketer as well. And he's now going to be helping promote our ecosystem by bringing in users through voting. So it's a different marketing angle, but promoting one system. He's a great guy to have on board, and I'm really going to be leaning on him as a partner for areas where he's stronger than I am.
Okay, so the concept is that all the features like vote and DNS will be integrated into the current system and not be something like merge mined chains or something?
No, one chain, no merge mining. Now, what's going to happen is this. We're going to get a lot of applications, a lot of transaction volume, and it's going to push us to grow and improve the scalability of our system. If we cannot grow scalability as fast as our user base, then we're going to have to contemplate multiple chains in the future, but that would be basically like a stock split. Everyone would end up in both chains, and they'd probably tackle different markets or whatnot. But everyone would be on the same boat, and that would be the long term if we grow so fast that we can't handle the transaction volume. But the goal is really to grow to handle the transaction volume and lightweight clients. And I think that's the benefit that DPoS has, is that we can have managed centralization with shareholder approval. Which I wanted to get back to. What is the social consensus on the BitShares DAC? And that consensus, as far as I'm concerned, is shareholder 51% vote rules. They can do just about anything they like because we have such a diverse ownership. No one wants to harm the share price, and so it's really no different than any other real company out there as far as shareholders can do anything they like. So that is much more flexible. Any hard-coded caps in the software or hard-coded parameters, those are all theoretically subject to change if there is good reason. Now, obviously, change affects share value, and suggesting change, particularly changes to the shareholder agreement, which is the source code, is going to require careful planning, and if we can, try to get more than 51% vote. And I'm looking at ways of orchestrating greater consensus through vote buying and selling. If you don't care which way it goes, you can sell your vote to someone who does care. If you don't like which way the majority are going, or you can sell your vote for a price that compensates you for any losses you'd incur by the change, which would allow greater consensus because those that benefit can pay those that are harmed by any change. And that is a way of reaching much tighter, much closer to unanimous consensus than even 51%. And I'm looking at the possibilities of those types of things. Oh, also, BitShares Me is not RIP. We're going to lower the fees on user-issued assets. So BitShares X becomes Me. And it's going to be up to the wallet creators to figure out how to filter the assets on the chain instead of bombarding the users with everything.
So there will be two kinds of assets essentially on the same chain now.
Yes.
And the user-issued assets are going to be cheaper. If somebody wants to create an asset like, say, Bit Soybeans to help in Argentina, then that's going to be a higher price still because you want to make sure that it remains an ungamed market.
Bid assets must be approved by the delegates because they're publishing price feeds. Anyone can create a theoretical bid asset. Until delegates publish price feeds, it doesn't go anywhere. So it would be wasted effort.
Now that you're talking about apps on the blockchain and talking about everybody having a stake, I do have a question about the different apps having their own communities on this blockchain. Is there then a mechanism that they can make their own choices, or is this all the entire network deciding on all the different apps as well?
The blockchain is like a utility. All the apps end up paying fees for using the utility. And what they gain by being on our network is integration with all the other apps. So they would probably have their own communities. A lot of apps might use the blockchain without their communities even knowing it's using the blockchain, and that's fine. Will they have their own tokens? I don't want to see a bunch of virtual DACs on top of this. I think we should have features that all integrate with each other rather than a bunch of virtual DACs with their own tokens that try to accumulate fees somehow. But I could easily see someone using the scripting environment to do that.
Sorry for the occasional silence. There's a lot to take in a short notice.
Yeah, it is. One sad thing is that we're no longer going to have 5 DACs in the top 10, but maybe it'll help us get to being number 1 or 2 much faster.
Yeah, and understood it. Like I said before, the realization of BitUSD and using that. Sorry, mighty thunderstorm outside here. But the realization of BitUSD and using it in all the other DACs kind of forced this merger. I kind of see the point in that. But to me, getting to grips with having several self-sustaining DACs and merging them into one is it's a big leap.
It's a kind of a big leap for me too. I'm not gonna lie. This is one of those things. The whole one blockchain to rule them all has been something that's really I don't know. And I can also say that the one concern is the psychological advantage to having 5 BitShares DACs on the top 10 and something like CoinMarketCap is a huge advantage that I think that might be overlooked to a degree.
Perhaps that is a disadvantage, but having 9 in the top 10, 9 through 10, or having 1 in the number 1 spot, which is better, because the combined network effect of those 9 is probably enough to put them to number 1, even though individually they'd all be less than number 1. That's what we're looking at. But it's really just a matter of how many systems can I be involved in. If I'm going to be involved in one system and I'm going to try to make it the best I possibly can, then that's what I'm going to do. And if that's the case, then I want to make BitShares X the best I possibly can. I am all for, 100% for, some other team coming along and competing with us. Why? Because it will accelerate development and it will get the diversification. I think a lot of these DACs have had value because, to a large part, the Invictus team was backing and supporting the design of it, right? We were working with Vote, we were working with music, we were working with DNS. And so because of that close relationship, there was a lot of brand association lending value to those DACs. And whereas other clones that don't have our team behind it, even though we support them and we don't come out against them, have not been anywhere near as successful, which means that all we're really doing is dividing that one brand, and combining the brand is probably better for every single one of those systems. So now, people come on the forums and asking, where's your loyalty? How are you going to, are you just going to abandon BitShares X and move on? I don't want to buy BitShares X if you're going to move on to the next big thing when it comes out. And I'm sure that post is just representative of what a lot of large investors were thinking. And there's been a lot of people, even from day one, that have come along and said, you guys are too fragmented, you're fragmenting your market cap, you're competing against yourself. I was trying to stick to the principles of free market competition, but once again, those are things that apply at scale, When you're small, it's a killer. And we need to pull our strength, grow and then divide instead of divide and try to grow.
Out of curiosity, I can't help but wonder if perhaps this could have been, and maybe even still is possible, I don't know. To me, the timing could have been, if the timing was done correctly and there was essentially, like, if we had, 5 DACs in the top 10 or the top 20 even, and then it was announced as, oh my God, guess what? We're going to have, all of these DACs are so successful. Now we think it's time to turn Voltron and let all the lions come together. BitShares will be the sword. And now it's time to do what to do this, to evolve, essentially. When everybody had already had that time to look at the market caps of all of them and actually kind of like have that psychological certainty there where they felt like, oh my God, they've made headway. Look at how many chains they've created that have already made it past almost all the altcoins. Something like that could have been really effective as a strategy to jettison this type of to turn that into, to almost mitigate a lot of the fear and uncertainty that could have come from it. That's my take on it. Where does everybody stand on this type of stuff?
Like Bytemaster said, he said he's now going to work on the next project, or he needs to focus on some of the next projects. So the problem is actually right now. Also, I don't know if delaying this might be a good strategy if like Bytemaster said, if all the separate DACs are all going down because Bytemaster isn't on board. I don't know if it's that big of a deal, but listening to Bytemaster, he probably has a better view on this than I do.
Well, I can say one thing. We don't know a whole lot about what's going on behind the voting DAC because of the secret sauce. From Bytemaster's post when it came out, I think the secret sauce is probably as good as A1, maybe better. And I like myself some A1 sauce, but I guess we're gonna just kind of have to wait here. And I'm assuming that this is all the good stuff that you're thinking about is actually kind of moving you in that direction, and you can't really tell us it yet. So it's kind of danged if you do and danged if you don't, if I'm correct here.
Well, we've got these expert marketers out there that tell us what we need to do to sell this thing. And, they've been rolling with the multiple DACs with, kind of like, we don't like it, but if that's what we have to do, we'll market it. They've been telling me since day one that we need clarity and simplicity, even if it's not theoretically as optimal and as diversified. So as far as the effectiveness and the conversion rate of the marketing, I think we probably significantly increased the success rate for that. And that's not to be underestimated, the value in that.
Just to make doubly sure, the work on the toolkit as a usable toolkit for other DACs will continue, right?
Yes, we still plan to maintain the toolkit as the pure system without any code in it for handling forks. And there will be there'll be a separate repo for the official chain, and we also are going to have a dev shares chain, which is going to evolve with hard forks coming out much faster than on the official chain, with experimental new features and never reset. But it's not going to be suitable for those who want to park capital because it's going to have lots of experimental features. A bug might result in the chain going down for a week or two while we fix it. It could result in excess shares being created unexpectedly. And so it's going to be a separate chain, but it's not going to compete with the main stable chain. And we want it to have economic value for the purposes of testing features that require economic value. You can't test BitUSD on a testnet. It just doesn't work. But we could test BitUSD on a DevNet if we want to do bonds or options markets or any of these other features. We'll have to do that on the DevNet. And then after it's proven itself, then we'll move it to the stable live BTS network with the benefit of only upgrading the main network a couple times a year rather than every week or so.
Can you hear me?
Sure can.
Okay, I would like to ask, how long have you been moving towards that decision, or did it really just evolve out of the conversation and the discussions from the last days?
We have been talking about adding dilution to BitShares X to fund long-term growth for a while. Our thinking being that the dilution could help fund the team to maintain it independent of us. But I have been trying to figure out how to resolve the fact that I have to help support and build these competing DACs. After the dilution plan originally proposed for BitShares X was roundly rejected in favor of allowing competition, I set out working on the other DACs that we needed to build for vote. Right, I'm trying to help Adam build the best vote DAC possible. So I said, hey, Adam, how can we build the best vote DAC? And we came up with a plan, and it was a really, really good plan. So good that I was very excited about it. And when I revealed my excitement for that new DAC, all of a sudden, everyone who was against dilution in BitShares X was worried that the vote DAC would kick BitShares X in market cap because it can dilute and because it has a mix of features that are competitive with BitShares X. We try to say, well, we're not going to cannibalize BitShares X because we'll only have BitUSD, not any of the other bit assets. But of course, the feedback is, yeah, but they could turn it on in a second. The feature is there, and they would have no incentive not to turn it on because the vote holders would want to compete for maximizing their share, and so that's what they would do. And then people were very worried and scared because, well, if the vote's going to be so big, I want to get out of BitShares X and into PTS or something else until vote's liquid and they can buy it. And it was that fear that caused the initial panic. And upon realizing how that would happen, I realized the potential damage to BitShares X and our entire ecosystem as a result of two DACs that are real competition. I think few people were worried about DNS competing with BitShares X. And few people were really worried about vote until I suddenly had a lot of confidence in it. So that kind of pushed it to the head of, well, I can't just ignore PTS and AGS holders, and I can't just put it all in BitShares X because, so I needed to resolve this, and that's what pushed us to it this week. It's really been an evolution of ideas, and as always, I like to keep things public and transparent to a fault. So I publish ideas as soon as I think of them and ask for feedback as soon as possible. And unfortunately, that causes the market to respond to my every passing idea. But I think ultimately this has resulted in a solid alternative that everyone, at least everyone really close to us is really enthusiastically on board and thinks this is what should be going on. This is the further out you get from the inner circle, if you will, the less knowledge there is and the less understanding and the more fear there is.
So another question would be, if like in a few years it would all like get very big, like the market cap would be really high, and especially the transaction volume would be really
Hey
high.
guys,
So
I've got to go. I've got another meeting, but continue to talk.
all right. Okay, so continue my question. Maybe someone else can answer it.
Well,
So,
Stan's here. Are you? You're
Stan.
still here, Stan, right?
Yes, I'm here right now.
Could
Like,
do you think that you could field some of these questions for us?
There's always a chance.
Okay. You want to go ahead, Dulolo? Sorry about that.
Sure. So when it gets to scale and the transaction volume would be really high, how would you then separate the different features of BitShares into the different DAX again? Like, how would the stake in the okay, I get. Okay, I just have to think about it myself maybe. But did you think about that process, like how you would make different chains again out of that one chain?
Well, yeah, one of the things that always happens, and you can look at any big company, there's always some group of people with a better idea that they can think of how they can, compete by specializing into something that gives them a unique advantage in a vertical segment somewhere, is one example. And of course, I have no doubt that there will be other competitors coming out of the woodwork. Some of those will leverage non-technical means. They might put a cute doggy picture on the front of it and start marketing to doggy lovers. And so there'll be a lot of things that happen. And not to mention which, that when you get to big scale and you decide to announce that you want to have a separate chain for whatever business reasons make sense, once you've got the name and brand recognition and you announce there's this new thing, just watch what Apple wants to do when it moves into the phone business, right? It goes from 0 to full speed with a simple product announcement. And so we think when we get up to the scale you're talking about and need to create specialty DAX to get some advantage in the market we don't have, we'll be able to quickly launch another one and have it reach critical mass instantly, just because everybody already is up to speed, understands the concept, understands what we're doing, recognizes our brand and says, this is going to be successful, I want in on it. And so between the combination of our ability to launch DAX at critical mass once we're that size, and other people's desire to go do something that we aren't doing because we made one decision and they think it's a bad decision, and that by doing the opposite they can have a competitive edge and go, and other ones that do it because of they've got a unique thing like a special constituency. I know of places right now that have or certain people that are developing things that have a unique in or an advantage with some powerful force, I'll say, that can launch them immediately by associating with that powerful force. So all those things mean there'll be plenty of competition, but we shouldn't generate our own and do infanticide when we're just starting out. We want to draw people to this from all different reasons until we're big enough to do those other things.
It makes sense in general for me. Like I was, I'm all pro the merger. Like that makes a lot of sense to me. So, can you summarize or can you say which DAX that were thought to have an own chain would go into BitShares X now? DNS, Vote, and is there another one?
Well, Dan has published the ones that are, seem to be in agreement that they want to do it. So Adam and Toast are both see the advantages of pulling together. Cobb just posted on the forum that they're going to take a wait and see attitude. There are ideas for how to include them and advantages for that, but there's also reasons why they might want to stay separate. So, let them stew on it, and when the time comes, if they have a proposal that's a win-win proposition, then they can propose it. Don't know a whole lot about what Denny's plans are. He's been, I think, published 2 words on the subject, which was good idea. And other than that, I don't know what else he may be thinking. But each is a test case by itself. Right now, I would say that I know of the 2 that I just mentioned, plus another one I can't mention yet. So there's at least 3 that are not inside the tower at this point. And they may stay out and grow on their own. I don't know. But, that's really where we are in the process. I think that we have listed all the things that will participate in the first proposal that will, get addressed by people. And what comes after that, I'm sure there will be lots of opportunity. Maybe Apple will want to merge with us next, and maybe they'll want 90% of the whole thing. So who knows? I'm kidding.
We would rename every bit to I.
Don't be shy, guys. I know DeLulo has 120 questions because he always has them all listed in his brain. But
yeah, I'm struggling with myself, with my idealism about everything decentralized and being practical. So I'm finding it out on my own here.
Well, I will say one thing is that we share those same ideals. And sometimes being practical means that you have to take the steps that take you to those ideals. And certainly network effect is something you got to take care of first. And this looks like the way to get to the network effect needed to be then start continuing those. Because philosophically, that's our end game is as much decentralization as possible and changing how the way the world works. So we're not going to give up that, but we tactically on there have got to make sure that we don't do things that are driven by ideology and cause us to lose the opportunity to make the impact we need. And to make that impact, we got to grow up to where we can't be killed off. And we really can never take a position that leaves the competition with an easy way to leapfrog us. So we've got to stay agile and keep attacking. If you've ever watched, for those of you who watch American football, the dumbest thing they ever do is when they get a lead, they sit on it. And, they play what's called prevent defense, which basically means you give up the easy stuff and try to keep them from scoring quickly. We don't want to go into a prevent defense mode. We want to be attacking, and that means picking what we think will grow the system fastest.
Yeah, I understand the current practical implications. A couple of questions, like if Daxon would still handle BTS, might be interesting to go into. Also, maybe for me then, I'm expecting a little more pushback from the current gatekeepers and people in control. So I'm wondering if this current bundling of force might make it an easier target to attack in the future.
Well, there's 2 halves to that question. You're absolutely right. It makes us a much taller poppy much quicker, but we're going to have to face that sooner or later as well. But the other thing is that it's possible to get big enough that they realize they just can't squish you, and therefore it makes you harder to attack in that sense. Or you don't necessarily die behind the scenes like you might if you're just a little guy. Just being able to afford the necessary legal support is something that is very hard for a bunch of small little docs to do. And we still have the thing that if for some reason they were to take out some of the scaffolding that we still have, and we still view Invictus as scaffolding that is needed now to erect some of these things, but we want to be in a position where Invictus can go away and everything keeps working without us. So that's one of the reasons why we have so many independent developers. They may be working on the same thing, but if one of us has to stop working for some reason, the team doesn't have any reason to stop, and that builds robustness.
There was somebody said something here. I'm trying to find it. Go ahead and well, hey Jenso, you're here. Do you have anything that you'd like to ask or any points to make?
I just got here. I don't want to, have them rehash anything that they've already talked about. Did they just come on?
Mm-hmm. Not too long ago.
Is there any way that you can kind of dumb down this allocation? I stand from the standpoint of an AGS BTSX holder, but can you guys really make this very plain and simple to all of us? The proposal that I was reading about in the thread.
That was handled by Bytemaster earlier. That's what he came on when he said that. So he did point out his argument, and that there wasn't actually one single perfect solution. Seems because everybody is looking at it from their own perspective. For example, how PTS thinks that they get shafted because AGS will now become liquid and stuff like that.
Sure, and then you can make the argument that PTS can realize gains after every snapshot by, then selling their PTS, and now AGS get both sides to benefit, really.
The way you have it right is when everybody is screaming the same amount. So that means you shared the pain well. And I hear everybody for the past day, passionately making their arguments about how it's not fair for them, and therefore it's equally unfair for everybody. Anyhow, there's that. There's the desire to be, simple in terms of easy to explain. And then, one of the things I learned today when Bytemaster was describing things was his analysis went far deeper than what people normally do. He didn't just analyze it based on market caps. He pointed out that liquidity is a big thing, that while you technically have some price based on the small number of people trading, if you ever tried to realize that price for all of those holders, you'd find very quickly that the price would plummet. So you can't just take market cap. You have to take market cap scaled by liquidity in order to get some estimate of what the actual cash out value would be of each of these things at that point. So he analyzed it very deeply, and of course other parts of the issues are negotiating with other leaders for the other projects and trying to come up with something that they could swallow, because they're giving up some of their independence and what they may have seen as growth potential. Having discussed it for a long time, they are now convinced that they'll do better under the new plan than they would have alone, but it still was a negotiation process. So he's been, it's very lonely at the top, I guess, having to, assimilate all this information. And, of course, the biggest thing is his reputation for having a certain amount of wisdom, or being the godfather of this industry, or however you want to look at it. That's more important to him than by far than any individual numerical benefit. He realizes that ultimately, however he picks, if he's off a little bit one way or the other, everybody's going to benefit so much from this that that it's really splitting hairs at some point. And so he's trying to do it in such a way that he accomplishes the most important thing, which is to preserve his reputation as an honest broker. So that was overwhelmingly what motivated his line of thought. And I'm sure that if he had infinite brain power, he could have found a better solution, but he came pretty close.
So
It's
says his
difficult.
scientist.
It's one of the difficult issues with this social contract, and people wanted to keep to the deal, is that everything changes and all the solutions that are found changes the situation from before. So making a contract and then have that overrule everything that happens afterwards is kind of, well, I would like to say hard, but it's close to impossible.
Yeah, the social consensus is not a suicide pact. Okay, so it was very clear that if he had to honor the social consensus as conceived, or at least as people thought, I mean, his social consensus has more parts to it than what people typically list. Most important of which, he said he's building a company, not a currency. And so people who want to layer the conventional wisdom about what you should or shouldn't do for a currency onto this as if it was somehow part of the social contract, forget that he says, I'm building an unmanned company and it's going to get its wisdom about how companies grow and what's successful strategies for companies, not successful strategies for currencies. And so obviously companies do value infusions as a standard practice. And so when people come along and want to hold him to that as if that was part of the consensus, well, that's a problem. And the number one overriding thing is protect shareholder value. And when we weigh a whole lot of these other fine points of what the benefits might be and what problems are solved, it still comes down to the fact that he had duties, that there was a conflict of interest between the duty and promises to BitShares X to grow that and the promises to holders of investment stakes in new things, because he gets smarter after every DAC. And so if his obligation is to keep creating DACs, and when he creates them, to make them the best he knows how, then it's clear right now, his opinion is that new DACs are going to need many of the features of BitShares X, and they're going to need to have the ability to do capital infusions so that they can grow more aggressively than without it. And so the very next DAC that he would work on, this happened to be Vote, but he hits it, says, what's the best thing I know how to do for Vote, figures it all out, and then says, ooh, this is going to be so good that if we do it, it'll just kill BitShares X, because everybody will say, Vote's a better deal. If I'm going to vote my cash, unless I'm just diversifying, I got to have some of this new Vote thing, because it does everything BitShares X does, and it has a whole lot much more powerful way to attract new users, which gets the network effect faster, and new ways to get credibility and acceptance in whole new demographics that we wouldn't have otherwise. And he says, if I do that, it's not going to allow me to then protect people's investment in BitShares X. And I could say, okay, we're releasing this and we're going to snapshot BitShares X so that people get a share of this new thing. But it would still have the effect of then watching BitShares X tank in the marketplace as this newcomer, this new more powerful DAC came in and sucked up all the investment excitement. And we didn't want to see that BitShares X go down in flames because of the effect on our reputation and everything. And so it became very clear that there's no choice. You want to get all the goodwill and all the investment in the brand and everybody who's heard of BitShares X and everything, you want to get that rolled into this new super DAC, because put those two together and it's even a super duper DAC. And then you don't have this flaming hulk of the previous version still laying there smoking in the ashes for a long time for people to point to and say, look, the first thing they tried flamed out. Far better to merge and go forward than to do something that's going to eventually render your previous product obsolete.
Out of curiosity, I can see the value in PTS and AGS because that's kind of how I saw it. Was if Bytemaster gets onto one of these DACs after BitShares X is done, that there's a potential that these other DACs are going to outcompete. So that was kind of the value proposition to me for PTS, was saying, hey, I can diversify my investment, lower my risk, and have a stake in all of them in case, one of them goes to the moon and the other ones, like you said, are laying in a burning heap. I'm thinking that there might be other people who bought BitShares PTS thinking that way. Can you speak a little bit to what their concerns might be now with what's going on?
Well, you still got the key feature. In fact, it's when you do a merger, you expect to get benefit from everything that merges in, and the benefits of PTS now sit there inherited from PTS, and AGS get inherited by BTS, which becomes the new protoDAC for everything going forward. So now, in addition to all the potential of making profit and all the potential capital appreciation and all the network effect of BitShares X, one of the other benefits that you have to sell in the same marketing pitch is, hey, this is a protoDAC for other things, other people that want to join our community that may not want to merge into the actual network, but want to still be separate, but they want to get a hold of our network effect and participate. They can simply honor this. And if you thought, as we've seen already, people have been willing, third parties, whether they've been successful or not, have been willing to say, yeah, I want acceptance of this community. Well, as that network effect grows, being able to have, the stamp on your new app that is like an Apple or a Microsoft approval or of it gives you that desirability. Well, now the new protoDAC capability that's now going to be inherent in owning BTS is going to be another reason to own it. Not only am I invested in this big super DAC that's going to compete aggressively to keep and maintain that primary network effect and that really deep market depth on bit assets, people who are surrounding it, third parties that are doing something different, will still honor that. And once again, I hinted at another one I know about that will be announced when they want to announce it someplace else in the world than where we're located. When that actually happens, they would still be honoring BTS. So we get still have that benefit of getting diversified as time goes on and people start doing other specialty DACs or things that don't need to be merged in. And so I don't think we really lost that capability. It's still there.
If you guys don't mind, I'm going to open it up for some of the new guys who came in here too, because I'm sure all of you have questions, and some of them have already been covered, but I don't know how long you have, Stan. So if I could just ask this, Kisa asked a while back, and I promised him I would get to it. So Kisa 0145 asks, marketers are are in the driving seat, and that could be dangerous. So they should complement, not drive development. BTS needs strong marketing, but it should not be amended in a way that brings best market success, in my opinion. There should be a higher purpose than marketing success. Do you have any? Here's another part of it. Rather a worry if marketing is going to get too much influence on the team. Please kindly ask for me if you think it is a reasonable question. Could you speak a little bit to that topic or that point that he made?
Sure. That's the first time I've ever heard us accused of having too much marketing influence. We've been accused of being a bunch of geeks who, knew how to engineer huge houses of cards that could not be explained to anybody. And so we've recently explained that the marketing guys are trying to get our message simple enough that we can expand outside of the geek community to a whole world out there that doesn't even know what crypto means. So I think, if anything, we're moving back towards a better balance where we have marketing feedback into what features are needed to sell and grow the system. To be fair, that doesn't mean that you're not going to have a variety of different windows into the overall blockchain. I think Dan has mentioned already that one interface to this blockchain system is a voting booth. Okay, there will be another interface used for signing up and getting a registered certified ID, and it uses the same blockchain, but the look and feel isn't any different. Is completely different in terms of how it looks. People don't need to see everything about the blockchain for the application they're running. So we'll have our little wallet here, but we know that BitSapphire is coming out with a completely new take on that, and the marketeers are coming out with their view of what their target customers need to see. So I think over time, you'll probably find somebody make a super geek console that looks like a day trading console with lots of bells and whistles on it that's optimized for people that have that view into the blockchain. So, I'm sure that at some point along the line, Toast will make available his newest bot, which maybe doesn't even have an API. It just runs on your computer, and you've got to be a tech wizard to run that bot. So there are a lot of different kinds of views into this system, and I don't think you should think that just because somebody is building a new way to look at it that's super simple and doesn't look like anything other than an ordinary credit card, for example, that's the interface. Here's a card, just stick in your wallet. That's the only thing you need. Well, that's another interface into our blockchain right there. And so I think you can have your cake and eat it too in 1,000 different ways, and that's good.
Fair enough. Thanks for answering it, Stan. And with that said, I don't know how long you have, Stan, so if you could let us know or let the group know where you stand on time. We don't want to take your time too long, but it's very, I'm sure all of us are appreciative that you guys come on here and try to help sort through the confusion, because these are growing pains that we're all dealing with as a community. And I think anybody who's in their right mind realizes that we're in a space that adapting is necessary, and kind of sometimes realizing, and this is something I know from personal experience on the forums, that that sometimes our preconceived notions get us into trouble. And maybe sometimes we have to grow out of them. But do you have time to answer any questions from any of the newer people who came in?
I'm willing to stay as long as there are questions that are, really burning at people and making them unhappy. When we start getting to the point where we're just chit-chatting, I'd like to go. So if you've got some burning questions, go ahead. But otherwise, I'd like to put out the fire.
Sure. With that said,
maybe one question. We've been talking about the shared distribution, but we haven't talked about in what form this new DAG will be made. Will it be the same tokens? Will it be the same, no dilution, with dilution, stuff like that?
Well, there's, I guess, maybe a few technical details. One thing that, there'll be little cosmetic things like dropping the X off of the name, so that, you'll simply update your wallet and it'll look like BTS. There'll be a lot of missing X's, but that's about it. Obviously, the total number of shares out there will be in. I think we'll have to come up with some way of showing vesting shares to the extent that things phase in over time, figuring out how you can see your shares and understand when you can use them, however that shakes out. And keep in mind, that's all still just an idea for discussion. on what the right vesting strategy is. Clearly, we're trying to scratch the concern of having this thing not generate any transients other than the ones we've generated by talking about it, due to a sudden change in the number of shares. So one of the ways to sort of smooth that out so that there are no big changes, or so that, let's put it this way, the changes are less than what Bitcoin is experiencing all the time. I love that line, which is, if anybody comes by in my state, say, what are you talking about? Bitcoin's doing all that too, and they're just burning it. We're using it for all this great thing to grow. How much better than Bitcoin is that? So that's, I guess, what I think is the best way to sell that, and the reason for the need to feather things in so that they fit under that overall umbrella of rate of, I think Bytemaster proposed 2,500 BTS per block as the maximum that could be done. And if we put that envelope over top of, over the next 2 years, and then try to fit all this new stuff in under that, everybody has to agree to take and receive things slowly, and that would include the deals with the other leaders. They had to agree to phase in their stake over that period of time. So it's not like we're just picking on AGS and PTS. We're trying to get it so that everybody gets their stake without causing any big spikes and fitting underneath that Bitcoin curve.
So you're essentially trying to do the opposite of a pump and dump.
Yeah, we're doing a dump and pump. Can't everybody see that?
DeLuo said, is it possible that if I donated $1 to the AGS after February 28th, which is when the BTS snapshot was taken, for anybody who doesn't know, and can I get less than $1 worth of BTSX through the 7% back at the current BTSX valuation?
Well, I haven't.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I haven't done that calculation, so I would simply be guessing. I am very confident that you look at this thing a few months from now, and yes, overwhelmingly. So if there was that, and I don't say there is or isn't, I just don't know. Bytemaster did all those kind of calculations with a couple other people helping him, but I didn't sit in on that. So I'm sure someone will do that calculation and post it and show, at the expected rate of growth when we kick in, bringing in, all these different streams of new users. I think it'll become a non-issue very quickly. And so, yeah, that's inconvenient if somebody wants to liquidate right away. But, if we can agree, and I know not everybody has this philosophy, but if we can agree that midterm considerations have precedence over short-term conditions, and that we're willing to endure short-term transients to get higher in the mid and long term, that's certainly our philosophy and how we want to manage things. We never want to make our decisions that take us in some direction that will limit the mid and long term so that we can have less pain in the near term.
Roger.
I had a question about this 2-year vesting period. How attached are you guys really to this concept? Having people kind of tied in for 2 years seems like really a long time. I understand what you're trying to accomplish. You don't want there to be just a huge dumping kind of effect. But maybe, like they did with the lotto shares, where shares mature at a random time period between a date so that the market's allowed to adjust the price over time. But 2 years, it just seems like a really long time.
Well, it seems like a long time to me, too. And, I suppose that number It's the proposed number, and if people can show a calculation that makes sense, that achieves all the objectives that were considered when Bytemaster put that number there. And keep in mind, the issue of putting in people's hands and having them dump it is a small concern. The hands that these are going into are trusted hands. They're people who have held the PTS and held their AGS for a long time. They're longtime supporters. We have really no reason to believe that the people that would be getting these are going to dump them. And so I would be so much as to discount that as almost a non-issue. The real issue of the whole thing is that we want to not have an inflationary spike that could do things like trigger margin calls. We want to phase things in terms of what the supply is. And as I mentioned a few minutes ago, having it all the different things, the new influx of value, accept their payout over time, so that at no time do we exceed that 2,500 BTS per block max share creation rate. That means everybody can't be at the head of the line to get all their shares on day one. And as I also mentioned, it's not just AGS and PTS, but it's Atom and Toast can't get all their stuff up front for their shares. They had to agree to let it be phased in so that we could generate their stake and stay under the Bitcoin curve, so that we could always be able to say to the industry, when anybody raises the issue of, ha ha ha, you guys are inflating, you're bad, we can say, we're not doing it as much as Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is burning theirs and we're using ours to grow. And that by itself is a huge marketing message in and of itself. Might even be a reason to do it if there was no other reason, because you can dramatize the message that Bytemaster made in his Vegas talk about how foolish it is for an industry to burn its seed corn. And so here we're dramatically showing the people, here's what Bitcoin could be doing if it was smart. They could be generating this kind of additional thrust on their growth. And so we actually welcome people to attack us on that, because it lets us make that comparison, what we're doing with it versus what they're doing with it. Even though I don't think we're going to go at that maximum curve. It'll always be less than Bitcoin, but it would exceed that curve if we tried to give everybody their new shares all at once up front. So, we got to keep it below that curve and spread out for that reason.
So if I'm understanding what you're saying, this 2-year vesting period would only apply to the, 500 million new shares that would be issued?
Well, once again, I'm not sure the exact numbers there. I don't have them sharply in my head just yet. But and I know there are different things. Part of this limit is on what the delegates can do, and part of this has to do with what are the deals for the different merging components. And so I don't have a real sharp way of telling you exactly how those pieces fit together. But I do know that a strong desire to not create a big increase in shares all at once, and to feather this in over time, such that we can make those points I was making about staying below the Bitcoin rate, is, I think, is the goal. And the actual numbers will probably get tweaked as people bring up valid points about this or that. But ultimately, Bytemaster will be weighing all that and trying to decide something that will be perceived as well reasoned.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I understand the final number will need tweaking and everything. I'm just more curious that the vesting period only relates to the new shares, whatever the number is. That, old shares, for example, they're not drawn into this 2-year stuck period. Because when I, as an investor, when I did my AGS donation, I'm in it for the long haul. But when I bought into PTSX, while I'm in it for the long haul, I know that I have the liquidity to move in and out as I see other opportunities come up. Not that I want to move out in any way, but I like options.
Yeah, I haven't heard any mention that of the there being any constraints on current shares. It's just that if you've got a certain number of shares out there right now and those are not affected, new shares that are created to make this merger happen and to compensate those that are bringing value in are the ones that have to be feathered in so we don't get a big transient.
That makes perfect sense. I mean, I don't have anything else to add.
Before I open it up for anybody else to talk, there is, on the BitShares subreddit, there is a post that says PTS holders shafted. New proposal, quote unquote, gifts liquidity to AGS. And then let me go ahead and read it for anybody who doesn't follow this stuff and read up on it. AGS investment was based on a social contract that required AGS to be locked in to the BitShares ecosystem perpetually. This prevents any downward price pressure on PTS from AGS investors. In exchange for this high-risk investment, AGS received 6 times, let me repeat, 6 times more equity than PTS investors for every dollar spent. As a result, an AGS investor would now own 6 times more BTSX for every dollar they invested. And in parentheses, he says, which I totally support. In the new proposal, AGS holders would be gifted with the liquidity of PTS, violating the social contract. Not only that, but AGS would maintain the 6x increase in equity in not only future DAX, but also in BTSX. So AGS gets to double dip into BTSX, gets gifted liquidity, keeps a 6x increase in equity without the corresponding risk, all in violation of the social contract, and sadly at the expense of PTS holders. When even a small minority of the AGS holders liquidate after this merger, PTS will feel the pain. I know you guys talked a little bit about this, but I wanted to directly let you respond to that.
Well, when we're looking at the whole thing, there certainly was a premium given to AGS for taking the risk. Okay, that's a downside and an upside risk that they're taking. Things could go better or worse for them. If all of that were true without other mitigating issues that I'll point out a couple in a minute here, then you would still say, all right, the AGS guys took the bigger gamble, and to the victor goes the spoils. And if they got any kind of benefit out of that, then good for them. Certainly, given that you can see out there on the website or out there on the blockchain that most of our PTS are still sitting there, and we're not moving them throughout this whole process. Therefore, whatever value they have is, we're experiencing that with the bulk of our remaining resources that were donated to us. So we certainly are sensitive to that issue. But one of the things that PTS did get in exchange for the gradual liquidity that AGS gets is they get to be stopped diluted immediately by whatever remaining mining was going on. So all that wasted mining didn't get diluted for them. That's not a 6x thing, that's a 20% kind of deal, but it is another factor that isn't mentioned in the angry post you just mentioned. And so, as Bytemaster went along and looked at that, he took into account all those things and agreed to the fact that, in certain cases here that it could be the case. and he probably has, if he was here, could give you more detail. Since I didn't participate in his whole reasoning process of what he went through to get to this, I'm not able to give you every factor he considered. Certainly, reading something like that is something that I'm sure he will do and consider if there is a serious problem that is perceived as correctly unfair. I'm sure he'll address it, but I think he's probably well aware of those two things and probably chalked part of it up to trying to have a simple, easy to understand story and being able to say, in some cases, if there is a difference, it's because the guys that took the bigger risk happen to make out better in the process. And if that happens, that's what I would chalk it up to, is congratulations, all you people who were in it for the long term and didn't hold out, your gamble paid off.
Okay, thank you for covering that. And I will go ahead and I'll post the link because I want to be fair. I'm biased. Everybody here knows it. We'll face it. But I'm going to post the link if you are wanting to vote against the plan here in the conference hall, so everybody can have their voice heard, because that's pretty much the why we're here. That's why this service is here for all of you guys. So you guys are insiders and you actually have the power to have your voice heard, which is not necessarily the case in most other crypto sectors around here. So if you want to vote on it, please feel free to. With that said, does anybody else have any questions or concerns that they'd like to voice to stay?
I'd like to ask, so let's say Hagfisher decides to also merge into, like his deck, the play deck, merge it into Bitches X. How would that work? How would the allocation or the AGS and PTS get a stake in Bitches X then?
Well, we haven't discussed that, so I can't say anything specific because I don't know. But in terms of in general principle, and rather than necessarily picking on Denny directly, let's just assume that there was some bank out there that wanted to suddenly start selling BitUSD through its normal bank channels. And they wanted to team up with us, and they brought the deal, hey, we have a global network of 1,000 banks that will start making BitUSD and Bit everything else available to our customers as account interest-bearing or yield-bearing accounts. And would you guys like us to do that? We'd like to have X% stake in what you're doing, and if you do, we'll do that. And I'll just pick a outrageous number just to give you an example. Suppose I said, yeah, let's split it 50-50. We're bringing all these on-ramps and off-ramps, and we're going to double or increase the market penetration by an order of magnitude, but we want half. How would that be handled? Well, that would all get documented up and brought to the community, and the community would have to vote on whether or not they wanted to do such a merger. Do they really want to, do they think, and by the way, this is what I would expect to happen, if a big or even a small bank were to say to do that, or if Apple came out of the woodwork and said, we want to make this available through all our channels, there would be this huge spike in the value of BitShares X, buy on the rumor. And then out of that would come an opportunity, because of that spike of excitement, of growth in value, resources with which to dilute back down to something that was still better than you were before, but that would incentivize the deal to make sure it went through. And then if everybody looked at that and said, wow, this is popular, look what happened to the price on this rumor, yeah, I'll vote for that because I want to see that. And if it happens, then you have the offsetting effects of a new infusion of value and new shares that represent that value. And if it's done perfectly, there's no change at all, but now greater growth potential. And usually when it's done, there's a benefit of a factor of multiples of upside for the downside you're asking people to vote on. That's how they usually structure such things. And so you would expect smart people in the community would do it. And then the other thing I would expect is that over time, people who still want to think about currencies and so on like that will get fed up with losing those votes and vote with their feet, and they'll do some other investment that suits their philosophy. And so over time, I think the people that will still be invested are the people that understand the benefits of doing that and would tend to want to do that, but that also become more educated, because the average user who's out there doesn't know anything about what's going on behind the scenes, just wants a little 5% savings account, isn't going to be voting because they're not even really aware of the company behind the scenes. So the active voters participating in this will be very informed, and so they will learn over time how to judge what's a good offer and what's not a good offer. And some mergers will go through and some won't. And hopefully we'll all be smart about what we vote for.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, but then if it vastly depends, the merger decision vastly depends on the vote of the community, like you said, wouldn't it make sense to have stakeholder voting implemented as soon as possible, and maybe even implemented before the merger with Vote and DNS is decided now, so that it can be a kind of a clean, if you want to say, merger according to the principle you just laid out?
Well, that's another one. That's another one of the reasons for having this gradual phase in. Is what Dan is trying to do this time is to use the tools we've got, because nobody wants to wait around and have uncertainty holding our price down while we add more voting tools and everything like that. So he's trying to structure the deals so that they can be fed out of delegate streams that people can vote with through the existing tools that they have by electing delegates that fund these different concepts and getting them installed. Long term, by the time the next opportunity for a merger comes around, we hope that some of the facilities of the vote deck will be in there to support more generalized elections on more sophisticated or complex deals.
Okay, so stakeholder voting on such a merger would not be easy to implement, so it could be applied for this merger.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose we could go out and hire some election company that puts on elections for companies and boards of directors and stuff like that, and go through a whole bunch of that stuff. That would probably do more damage than it's worth in terms of stringing this out and making it a problem. So once again, he's trying to use the tools we've got and structure the deals such that those tools make sense as much as possible. And all of the negotiations he's had with different people hinge on that. And I point out to you that right now there's really no voting mechanisms for any of the other merging components except DNS. Everybody else doesn't have a built-in voting mechanism. So it's, this first go around here is going to be, use the tools we've got in order to get something together that can work as, maybe suboptimally. But the long-term plan is to design DACs that have their own governance mechanism built inside.
All right.
Rune says here, to save time, what about just using delegates as a proxy for voting on this specific proposal? And as you go down, it says, delegates announce whether they are for or against the merger. If 51 delegates that are either for or against end up being in, that is implemented their way. Do you guys see any potential issues with that, or do you see some merit in this solution?
Actually, I think that's an excellent idea. I don't know what Bytemaster's take would be on it, but that's probably what I would bet he would think of by the time he gets down to that point in the thinking process. I'm sure that he'll hear about it now that it's been mentioned, and it seems like a pretty good plan to me.
I'll just
Also
let every
needs, that still leaves out BTS and AGS, so you need also maybe do message signing from the wallets or something.
Yeah, well, like you say, one way or the other, it's going to be hard to do it in a formal way. So I guess you really can't use consensus on the forum because only the most angry voices are heard, and you don't know what the silent majority really thinks. So figuring out how to go about dealing with all those stakeholders, we'll do the best we can this go around, and by the time the next thing comes around, we'll have a better system in place that basically would allow us to certify the owners of any other company, shareholders, or whoever's allowed to vote for whoever we're going to do a merger with, can use our facilities to cast their votes, not just people who have our shares. So that's the ultimate vision for where we want to get to as the software for the Vote DAC comes online.
Just so everybody knows, this is kind of a quick interruption, but along the lines of what Rune said, if the community consensus follows the poll that I posted at 9 a.m. this morning, a full 6 hours ago, there are now 147 members who have voted on it. And I will post it in here so everybody else who is not aware of it can post it, can have their voices heard. But as it stands currently, it says that there are 120 people of the 147, is 81.6%, my apologies, who are for the proposal, and there are 27 or 18.4% who are against it. So if this gives any statistical relevance to the conversation topic, we might be seeing a lot more delegates voted in who are for the proposal. But I'm not going to say for sure, we never know. But 147 votes is not insignificant in this current situation.
Yeah, that's better than 5-1, and it's starting to get to be statistically significant number of voters. So, certainly that will help to inform the decision as we go along. And since I just said that, I presume that if people hear that this particular poll is going to be paid more attention to, they'll weigh in. If there's a strong counter opinion out there, that would be a good place to express it until we find a better way.
Yeah, Emsky here says most are for the merger. The question is in the numbers. So I guess this is something that we as a community should form around. And if you go to the link that is provided, I'll just really quickly read what I posted here. It says, when this poll is completed, I intend to create and post a thread for people to propose distribution models to current holders of all BitShares tokens. At that point, we will consolidate and have a poll to choose between them. If you are interested in proposing your own model, please begin preparing your statements and reasons. Each will need to have its own threads so others in the community can discuss them individually. This poll is only to gauge the community interest in moving to a super chain on that basis alone at this moment. But the proposals would be based on the numbers like Emsky's talking about. But it seems like we are to the point where we're starting to look at people, our are more for the merger. We'll call it the merger for right now until we have a better term for it. But I'll go ahead and give it back to you guys.
Yeah, here's the problem. Okay, in terms of general philosophy issues, that those are good things to vote on because everybody is kind of equally qualified to think it through and decide the general direction they want to go. When it comes down to detailed engineering design that considers deep economic issues, 90% of the people out there are voting not really for what they think is fair, but for what they think is the best deal. Everybody can do the calculation for what's best for them. But that's not necessarily a vote for fairness. That's a vote for personal benefit. When you want to get a nice, fair deal across a lot of things, then you have to find somebody whose capacity and fairness, capacity to reason and fairness is above reproach, and let them do their best to balance all the different factors as much as possible in order to generate fairness, and then vote on up or down on whether he came close. But you're never going to be able to do something where you split out all these different numbers and vote on each one of them. Which do you want, 5, 10, or 15% for this thing? Because it's not a separable problem. Getting to a fair solution is voting on how to tweak all the different numbers in order to approximate a balance. And so ultimately, I think we're going to have to, there's nothing wrong if somebody else says that I can think just as good as Bytemaster, and I've got just as good a reputation as Bytemaster in terms of motivation for fairness, and I want to propose a different mix. Then you can vote between the two mixes, but I don't think you can design a mix by voting.
Sure. Well, mostly the reason why I did this was because we had multiple threads that seemed to be going in vaguely the same direction, kind of in random offshoots, and it seemed kind of like a clouded and unfocused talk. And I guess my main reason wasn't necessarily to say the community will have the final decision, but my thoughts were that if we had the community should have a very valuable discussion and really dig deep into this, because the value of this is in our community largely, right? That's where the network effect is going to come from. And at the very least, Invictus and the rest of the community would know all the reasoning behind making the decisions moving forward, or the potential options that were available. And engineers, sometimes the best thing that you guys can do is go to a forum and read what other engineers have encountered, and other things that may be variables that may not be taken into account at present when you're thinking about solving a problem, right? So this isn't intended necessarily, just so everybody knows, I don't want anybody getting the impression that this is like a final judgment and I've somehow set this up so everybody can come to their own conclusions on it, but or rather where I take control of the discussion. But it's more so we can open this discussion, because these are growing pains that we're all going to go through. And as we are forced to adapt by the market in different situations that occur, it's good that we all have a place where we can talk about the best way moving forward, because you never know, like Stan said, there might be somebody else out there who's very well trusted by the community who has a different way of moving forward, but if they never have a chance to voice their vision over time, and there's not really a paper trail for the people to follow, it opens us up for potentially more problems in the future. And really, this is all here for all the investors, because I was tired of seeing pump and dump scams all over the place. And this is supposed to be like somebody said on the forums, I don't remember who it was, BitShares is supposed to, feels to him like an island of genuineness in a sea of scam. And I butchered that quote, but it's a paraphrase here. But so I'm done rambling.
Well, yeah, I think that when you look at this, it brings out a whole lot of issues and facts. And most of the time, what you notice when you look down through it, all of the facts people cite to make up their argument are useful facts. Some may be wrong, but someone else can come along and challenge the facts. But eventually, we got a lot of facts on the table, and then it becomes a question of the relative weighting, which is a judgment call. It's not a precise thing. It's some things are more important than others in terms of what makes the fair mix. And that's where it gets really challenging, is layering on that balance. And then, sometimes you just want to get close, and it's more valuable at that point to treat two things equal, even though the chances of them actually being exactly equal are very small. And so that's certainly the case when you look at vote versus DNS. DNS is already fielded, but vote has some factors to it that could make it bigger in the long run. How do you weight, long-term size versus near-term maturity? And you got people personalities. You got, two guys who are, very valuable and smart people running these two things. Are you going to tell one of them that it should be 10% different one way or the other? At some point, you round it off to equal, just to keep everything perceived as fair and to get some certain emotions out of it. And I'm sure that part of the PTS AGS thing was rounding it off equal is desirable because it just makes an easier to explain story, and everybody, get over it. We're trying to play fair here and do things balanced. So there's that other factor in there. Not saying that if it gets too far away from equal, you shouldn't acknowledge that, but it is another thought in setting the weights.
Rune says here, we got to trust Dan's proposal. It is the only thing we will ever be able to agree on because we all have one thing in common, which is that we trust Dan. Any other proposal will just be a war of BTSX versus AGS and PTS, and I tend to agree. I'm here for different reasons, though. I'm a little bit weird, so everybody here knows knows this, that I'm a little bit biased. So I agree with you, though, Rune, on that.
And when we look at it, every one of us, however we chose to invest, acknowledged that there were potential black swan risks. Dan gets hit by a truck, or some law comes out that makes one of the investments not good as other, something gets hacked, all kinds of things that come out that can cause unfairness to creep in. And the one black swan we're faced with here that I still bundle inside the whole risk picture is that whoever it is we trust to make this call might not make the same value judgments as you would. And that's just, ultimately winds up has to get lumped into the investment risk, is that somebody in the end makes an honest, informed attempt to get close, and anything that deviates from that is lumped into investment risk.
Sure. Does anybody else have any questions or concerns that they'd like to voice? Oh, wait here. Danis, I almost missed it. Dano Testing says, just to be sure I understood something Stan said earlier. BitShares X holders will not be subject to the 2-year vesting period. And that's a question.
I haven't heard that said anywhere. If that's out there somewhere and I've missed it, but I don't think so. I think what we're trying to do here is take the big deck and not perturb it. The one that's got the big fat market cap, screw it up. And so we're phasing in the things we're adding to it as gradually and gently as possible. But in the process, keeping the existing system and value proposition for the shares that are currently trading and keeping BitUSD liquid and all that, we certainly don't want to jerk that around.
Okay, so I would agree with what Rune said, that in the end we will all go probably just with what Dan is proposing, and we all trust him that he makes a decision that is that just tries to be fair to all the parties. But on the other side, like, that's not on the other side, that's not a contradiction. What I'm trying to say, it's what I also think is important, that all the parties raise their or put forward their arguments, so Dan can weigh them in, and that all the arguments are made prior to when the decision is finalized. So the argument I would put forward for allocating more to AGS and PTS, and the disclaimer is that I have donated more to AGS than I've donated post February 28th than prior. That's the disclaimer. So, what was said by Dan was that the vote DAG might have more value than BitShares X, and now the vote DAG gets around or you could say that the AGS and PDS holders after the February 28th snapshot that have a right in more BitShares X, because the vote DAG is getting merged into BitShares X, only get 10% in BitShares X, is kind of unreasonable for me, because if the vote DAG was supposed to have more value than BitShares X, this allocation doesn't make too much sense for me. That's the one argument, and the other argument would be that most of the AGS funds, which Invictus is living off at the moment, or not living off, but is like paying for development from, it has been donated after February 28th. This is also something that should be acknowledged. So those are my arguments, and this doesn't mean that I'm like that. Yeah, okay, that's it. Okay, the rest would be philosophical, but yeah, that's it.
Okay, well, one thing that we can say is that it was said that the vote DAC could be more valuable, but we can't forget that the thing that would have made the vote DAC more valuable was because that to build it, Dan recognized he had to pull in all of the functions that are already in BitShares X. So it would start out by using and needing the features that were in BitShares X, and then it would add its own little component of being able to draw additional people into the application. And the big thing was having the ability to pay its own way by selling shares. If that, at the time he was saying that, BitShares X had ruled that out. So therefore, when he builds the vote DEX, he doesn't make that mistake again. And so it's more powerful because it has those new tools for promoting itself. And the same would be said for if Dan had moved on to work on some other DAC instead of vote, it would have been more powerful, because every single new DAC Dan would design under his obligation to PTS and AGS to keep making DACs so their donations got honored, he would apply all his lessons learned and put into them everything it needs to make a strong DAC. So he would have, his plan from everything he's learned is you need to build a super DAC. So the next DAC he built, whether it was vote or whatever, would have become a super DAC and swamped BitShares X. So I don't think we want to say that it's because vote by itself is bigger, but it's because vote benefits from being built with a smarter Bytemaster.
So yeah, that's a good argument. Yeah, thanks. I will put forward more arguments. But that's a good response.
Yeah. TBKMCJL, otherwise known as Mars Walker, we'll make it easy, asks, Stan, would this month's paycheck still be my last chance to buy BTSX at this low price? Can you tell us what's going to happen in the future?
Well, I don't know. Yeah, I've been here talking with my silver tongue, and all you guys are going to run out and buy a ton of BTSX as soon as I hang up and send the price back up to above 50. It's almost there already while we've been talking. So I don't know how much longer this fire sale deal caused by people jumping to safety. They create a huge opportunity for people who are in it for the long run and have confidence that we'll work something out that will make them wealthy. So as soon as people get more and more comfortable with what we're doing and less uncertainty, I think that the people on the sidelines are going to come flooding back in. So we may not have this implemented till the end of next month, as Dan had mentioned, but the uncertainty is going to fade away, I hope, pretty quick. And people are going to start saying, if I don't get in, and I'm saying that right now. I wish I wasn't on here. I wish I was out buying. So you guys make your own guesstimates of how long it'll take people to say, okay, got it. I'm going to buy it now rather than waiting till next week when it's probably back up where it was.
Does everybody feel like Stan has maybe answered the questions or assuaged their fears at all, or are there any other issues that need to be brought up?
I think he has done a really good job here. But maybe there are other good questions there. What would make sense to me is if everyone reads up the stuff. I didn't read it all. I didn't get the chance to, and maybe other people as well didn't. So if everyone reads up, finds his arguments, finds his position, and then we get together again, maybe with Bytemaster and Stan and maybe others, and then we have a better basis for discussing everything and a better basis for asking questions, since we read up everything. So maybe another emergency call or something tomorrow, or yeah.
Well, I don't know that I call them emergency ones. I guess we can call them emergency ones. I don't consider these emergencies. I consider them growth spurts, and growth spurts are painful in all places. Huh?
Emergency in a positive way. Like you can have an emergency to buy much if you want to say it that way.
Understood. TBKMCJL asks one more question here. Would this merge stall the plan of the BitUSD on-ramp that you were mentioning previously?
No, I don't expect that to hold that up. That's being implemented full speed ahead. The marketing guys love it because we've probably made it even simpler with the different websites they have to make. Maybe I suppose they have to go through and drop a few X's here and there, and they probably need to now make an updated set of videos. So there's a little bit of that going on, but I think they'll probably catch that up pretty fast, and that'll go forward as soon as all of the technical components that allow them to capture a new user and put a wallet with money in it in their hands, immediately. When all those components are in place, I'm sure that all of this part of the story will have been merged in and make them even more successful.
Joey made a good point here. He's talking about Hangouts maybe starting earlier in the morning. I know that there have been a couple people who are able to kind of represent the Chinese community and it's very important that we draw them in and pull them in so they can actually have a little bit more up close and personal relationship here as well. Would there be any issues with moving the time up a little bit earlier? Maybe like 8 or 9 in the morning as opposed to in the afternoon, or something to that effect?
Yeah, I think we can do something like that. I certainly can, and depending on when we do it, I'm sure Bytemaster would support that, because we certainly do value the Asian side of this thing, and feel really bad that the miscommunications that happen tend to impact them the most. So anything we can do to work on that is something we want to do.
Oh wait, you're saying it's the time is 4:19 a.m. there, so it is. What would be a good time? Do you know, TB, what a good time would be to bring people on board from the Asian side of the equation? Okay. All right. You mean from the present time? Okay. So that would be a good time. And just so you know, anybody who is has questions or wants to, I do this because I want to help everybody here. Don't be afraid to use this. This is here, if I'm not here, it's, this service is still going to be up and running, and feel free to come in here and ask questions, or if you want to develop or create something for the ecosystem, come in and ask us questions, or, pitch the ideas to us. We can record it and we can post it. These are the things that we can do from this server. Anybody can report, right? All of you have a little red button up there where you can start recording. You can download Audacity, and in 4 or 5 hours you can understand how to do some really cool stuff with the content if you've got the time to do so. And you can kind of post some of the information that you get from in here, and be one of the few people who's giving that information to the world, which is a really big deal, right? That's part of the network effect, and that's what these little things that we can all do with these tools that we're given can do some really substantial and awesome things for us. Yeah, we can actually make Stan's voice sound even more like Barry Manilow.
Awesome.
All right, well, thank you, Stan. If there's no more questions, maybe you can whisper in Bytemaster's ear at some point in time about potentially changing the time for the meeting. I can be here 5-6 hours earlier than this, no problem. Normally, when we have the scheduled hangouts, you can go to the Beyond Bitcoin Show subreddit, where anybody can ask their questions if they're not able to attend, and vote them up or down. The ones that are voted highest are the ones that I look at first to ask the questions, followed by, if there are no votes, the person who voted first, or asked the question first. So I go in that order. But with that said, follow us on Beyond Bitcoin, at Beyond_Bitcoin on Twitter, and check out BeyondBitcoinX.net, made by Jabba from the community, where we're trying to get all the people who are creating media through with all these tools that we're giving. We're trying to give them an outlet where any user can go and actually get the most up-to-date news that's going on in this ecosystem. And with that said, thank you for attending, everybody.
Okay, I'll ask Bytemaster to designate a time slot on Asian time when he's going to be available next, and he'll communicate that to you on the side.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Of course, guys.